finally reached the day where the entire hashtag Me Too movement just flatlines. A Manhattan jury, they handed down Sean P. Diddy Combs this split decision. Guilty of pimping plane tickets, but not guilty of running a trafficking cartel. Well, when the verdict came down, I thought to myself, I said, if America won't believe all women when the defendant is a walking red flag in designer shades, maybe the momentum that the movement had experienced just not too long ago has finally just fizzled out. I don't know, but I do want you to stick around because we're going to cut through the noise and talk about it today. And don't worry, there's no baby oil allowed. So coming up next on Unshakable with April Chapman. You guys, welcome to Unshakable with April Chapman, where we discuss all things social, cultural, political, and theological from a biblical perspective. I'm your host, April Chapman, and on today's show, y'all, we have got to talk about King Diddy Crat himself, Sean P. Diddy Combs. So I've not covered this story at all, quite frankly, because the details, y'all, that were coming out of this case was just simply too much for me. However, since I do believe it is important to provide commentary on what's going on in the culture, today we're going to do an overview of this nasty and gross case, not with all the gore details, of course, but I believe it's important for us to go over it because there's a lot that we can learn culturally from what has happened. So today, we're going to talk about P. Diddy's verdict, but before we crunch the numbers, I want us to answer the real question, which is how on earth did P. Diddy get here? We're going to have to rewind a little bit in order to answer that question because, quite frankly, P. Diddy's resume of rumors and freak nasty wrongiousness, y'all, is longer than a CVS receipt. And so what we got to do is we kind of got to go back to like the late 1990s. There were nightclub shootouts, NDAs thicker than a Junior's cheesecake, and the streets were talking. Back then, the streets were talking, but nothing really stuck. They were just rumors. Fast forward a little bit to May of 2016, that's when that hotel security cam footage leaked. And Diddy allegedly kicked his girlfriend at the time, Cassie Ventura, down an LA hotel hallway. Y'all, I mean, he punched that girl like she was a football. I saw the footage. Bootgate was real. And I'm still flabbergasted that that woman stayed with him after all of that. There's no way I'd stick around after somebody kicks me like a football. However, we're going to talk about why she probably stayed around a little bit later. Then it brings us to November of 2023. Cassie files a suit. She claims grape, right? Trafficking, drug-fueled freak-offs. Sean Combs, he wires a reported $20 million to Cassie, and then all of a sudden, the case just disappears 24 hours later. Then the dam just busted wide open. You had ex-staff, producers, even Kid Cudi's camp. All of a sudden, all these people start discovering this moral compass. The feds, they raid P. Diddy's LA home and his Miami mansion. And the next thing you know, there's a 5-count federal indictment. It drops. And all of that, all of the things we just discussed translate to Cassie struck this match. She struck a match. And then every flame-adjacent bestie after that kind of poured on the kerosene. So let's do a little count-by-count surgery. And I've pulled up these graphics so that we can go through each one. If you didn't follow the case, you do not have to worry. I'm going to condense it all in this episode, and it's not going to take very long. So on count one, we have RICO Enterprise. That was the count one. The verdict for that count was not guilty. Basically, the prosecutors, they tried to paint the Bad Boy Record business as this criminal syndicate. And they argued that P. Diddy ran an enterprise that funded everything from the parties to the payoffs, and that trafficking was part of the racket. And they leaned very heavily on witness testimony. They talked about the hush money, the NDAs, the cash flow that went to the assistants, even a so-called chain of command for his entire entourage. Well, the thing is, the defense kind of came back roaring. And they were like, you've got rumors, you've got gossip, you may even have bad behavior. P. Diddy is trash. But there is no enterprise worthy of RICO. And so these were considered standalone allegations, not evidence of a coordinated criminal conspiracy. And believe it or not, the jury agreed. There was no smoke, no inferno, and he ends up beating the count one of the RICO enterprise. He gets a not guilty verdict. So I thought that was interesting. Then count two. Count two is the schmecks trafficking of Cassie Ventura. And on that count, it is determined that he is not guilty. So Cassie's testimony had this Hollywood drama, right? She had private jet, the late night freak nasty sessions, and this $20 million settlement that kind of just vanished overnight. But the key to the trafficking is force, fraud, and coercion. And so the prosecutors argued that her silence proved fear. The defense, however, showed her Instagram posts, they showed her red carpet smiles, and all of that screamed consent. So, frankly, I'm kind of with the jury on this one. Unfortunately, Cassie was no child bride, okay? She was a whole grown adult who chose to play the whole VIP freak, nasty freak fest. And what you can't do is cry victim when you've picked VIP access. So this verdict underscores a very difficult truth, and that is that some women are using the court system as an ATM for their bad choices instead of owning their part in the party. So that's count two. Then you got count three. Count three was the transport for prostitution of Cassie. And on this count, they did render a guilty verdict. Now, I'm going to quickly explain that. This is where the law kind of bit P-Diddy in the butt. Ooh, no, don't worry about that. Anyway, listen, there's this act called the Mann-Act. And what the Mann-Act does is it makes it federal to move someone across state lines for paid schmecks, even if it's consensual, even if they've been paid well. Cassie hopped on Diddy's jet, okay? She got on the plane, she put that money, that bread in her pocket, and the prosecutor said that's prosecution, okay? The defense, they tried to downplay it as, travel for work, but the statute with the Mann-Act is very clear, so we just got to call it what it is. It was high-end prostitution. And the thing about it is hip-hop glories these types of arrangements, but federal law does not care about the platinum records or the champagne waterfalls. So count three, he received a guilty verdict. Moving on to count four. Now, this count was the schmecks trafficking, I love saying that word, of Jane, right? Jane was this anonymous accuser who claimed similar force and control, kind of like Cassie, but like Cassie, she posed for pics. She accepted the perks, and not one time did she ever bolt. She never left, right? The prosecutors, they pitched this coercion narrative, and the defense, they pointed to, listen, this was some mutual benefit. There was no duress involved here, so the verdict here was not guilty. Now, hear me clearly. I'm actually tired of hearing the same tune. I'm tired of hearing the I was forced, right? When the receipts show that there was mutual gain here. You can hate Diddy's hustle, and believe me, he is a horrible person. But you still, at the same time, two things can be true. We have to acknowledge personal agency. So now, as it relates to count five, that was the transport for prostitution for Jane. And on this count, the jury rendered a guilty verdict. So again, y'all, them jets did him in. Them private planes and jets were the issue. The defense tried to argue that, it was just travel. But flying someone across state lines for paid schmecks triggers the Mann-Act. And so P-Diddy was guilty as charged for that. Now remember, y'all, sin travels faster at 30,000 feet. Now, I can't prove that. I'm just saying, those private jet joyrides are a one-way ticket to federal charges, whether it's Yacht Week or a Grammy after party. It does not matter. The Mann-Act is what did P. Diddy in, And I just thought this was interesting. I actually kind of agree with this verdict as well. Now that we've broken down each count, what I want to do now is I want to zoom out and ask some really hard knockout questions. One, has hashtag MeToo's credibility just hit an all-time low, or is America finally waking up to the fact that believe all women can be a one-way ticket to injustice? Let me explain what I mean by that. Yes, I am a woman, but I don't even believe all women, because let me tell you something. I have been sick of this movement since it started. I have. Just confessions. I've been sick of the Me Too movement ever since it started, because it is done. All it has done is give cover to whoredom. Right? It's given cover to whoredom. And these chicks know that they are out here hoeing around, but they want to use the judicial system as a form of compensation and retaliation for the whoredom that they actively participated in. Like, we grown here. Do not tell me that none of these broads had a choice. I don't believe that. I am not that old. But I will tell you that I'm old enough to know that when a woman has, you ain't got no business going up to a hotel room visiting privately with a man unless you want something to pop off. Like, why are you there? Women, listen, women are shiesty, okay? Been a woman my whole life. Do not let the lashes and the long flowing hair fool you. Proverbs 6, as I was planning for this show, and I was like, okay, this is cultural commentary. How can I bring the word of God to bear to help my audience, even though y'all like, we don't really care about P-Diddy. There is so much broad application and things that we can learn here. And when I read in Proverbs 6 teaches, do not desire her beauty in your heart, and do not let her capture you with her eyelashes. Why? Here's the verse 26. For on account of a harlot is one reduced to a crust of bread. Do you not understand what Solomon is trying to say here? King Solomon is ultimately saying, listen, mess with these 304s if you want to. Okay, you can do that. But what begins as a momentary indulgence in sensual pleasure can lead to your utter ruin. Do not do it. When he says you'll be reduced to a crust of bread, there are so many things that he is talking about. When you meditate on that scripture, one, if you think about the financial devastation that P. Diddy is now experiencing, the cost of keeping all those hoes quiet, the bribes, the hush money, then you got to give them lavish gifts. All of this over time can drain a man's resources until you're left with virtually nothing. And then, not to mention the social collapse. Not only will you be broke, busted, and disgusted, think about the social disgrace and loss of your reputation. Is it worth it? Look at Bill Cosby. That case left that man stripped of his dignity and all of the support that he once had as an upstanding member of the community. I mean, this is Cosby we are talking about. The truth of the matter is that these are inevitable consequences. Just as you cannot cuddle fire without getting burned, right? You cannot expose yourself to these tricks without being consumed by them. It's just, they're going to be your downfall. So in short, that one reckless choice, chasing after fleeting beauty, y'all, it can cost a man everything, and it will reduce you from wealth and honor and drag you down to you're begging for your next meal, a crust of bread. If you think about it, do y'all remember how this movement kicked off? The chick to Tarana Burke, her original mission was to give true survivors a voice. But when you fast forwarded to 2017, all we had was hordes of women, many of which who had no credibility, no credible evidence. They were just storming the gates. And so we saw celebrities and politicians pulled into this moral vice. And so outside of when you look at R. Kelly, when you look at Trump, when you look at all of these decades of consenting adults, right? Like in the R. Kelly situation, yet his career collapsed overnight on salacious rumors and guilty pleas. Same with Bill Cosby. decades old cases, Hispanics, black women, white women, none got a fair hearing as the court of public opinion ran wild. None of these men. They were already guilty. Why? Because the word of these women just said so. And then if you look at Donald Trump, 36 allegations, 0 convictions, but his brand still took a hit, all because of Me Too, hashtag Me Too, believe all women. So here's the sticky truth. I am arguing that many of these encounters, they began consensual. I look at the situation with Cassie and P-Diddy and all the other groupies that tend to congregate around these powerful men, the champagne toast, the VIP passes, all those freak nasty nights, all of that, all of those things are adult choices. But once guilt sets in, or the deal goes south, or these women don't get what they want, boom, then you get the hashtag Me Too, the hammer falls down, and then your life is ruined. Okay? You got women who once walked freely in and through P. Diddy's world, suddenly they remembered their trauma. And I'm not saying they didn't experience trauma, but all of a sudden the trauma wasn't so traumatic. When you're in it, the trauma isn't so traumatic. But then when when you start, now that the lawsuits gets filed and the money is on the table for the settlement, now all of a sudden you remember. And so my argument is that these women, they've been amplified by the media and the news. Meanwhile, men are painted as perpetual predators. They are stripped of their jobs. They lose their reputations. They loss of freedom. It is pure, utter life destruction. Here's what I'm saying. I'm not saying P. Diddy is not trash. The stuff that came out in that case, you're like, bro, there is something wrong with you. But two things can be true at the same time. This whole hashtag Me Too foolishness, it has inadvertently caused workplace distrust. You have companies, they will never tell you this, but they don't want to hire women because of the propensity of women to cry foul and claim assault when they don't get their way. They will not tell you this in corporate America, but I am telling you, amongst the CEO, VP class, it is a thing. They don't want to hire women because, one, the argument is, we full of drama. You're too emotional. You're too much of a liability. You are a lawsuit waiting to happen. And all a woman has to do is cry harassment, and a man will get fired, and then he'll have to deal with 2 years or more of litigation with no leg to stand on. And so this is just one of the unintended consequences of the hashtag Me Too movement. And so this is not about me defending Diddy or excusing gross behavior, because Lord knows it was gross. But this is about agency. If you're old enough to flash a satin robe and sip in his private jet, sipping on his Dom Perignon, then you're old enough to own the consequences. Here's what a verse that I kind of alluded to earlier, but can a man carry fire next to his chest and his clothes not be burned? Or can one walk on hot coals and not be scorched? Listen, you light your own match, you have to endure the flames. This goes for P. Diddy and this goes for Cassie. But modern feminism demands a spot on the football team. Aren't we told that? We want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to do and be and go wherever men can go. But then they get a seat on the team, right? They get their position, but then they want to sue when they get tackled, right? So my thing is, you can't have a seat at the contact sport table and then wail and cry that this hurts too much, don't tackle me that hard. You wanted to be in the game, and well, now you got to deal with it. Last point. The left, they crowned P. Diddy. They crowned him king of the culture for years. They celebrated him. They paid him. Everybody was dancing to his music. They just elevated his empire. He was moving and weaving in and out of political circles. But then when the optics turned real ugly, I'm talking really, really ugly, what happened? They torched him with zero remorse. So this is what it looks like when the left cannibalizes and devours their own. So what's next for Me Too? So is it dead? I would say no. Is it broken? Absolutely. Why? Because real survivors deserve justice, but we can't continue to weaponize regret or shame and use the judicial system to provide palliative care for our bad choices as women. Everyone needs to be held accountable, right? If there's going to be a movement, which I don't think it needs to be, the judicial system just needs to work on the basis of each individual case. But if a movement needed to happen, it needs to be one where everyone is held accountable, predators and participants alike, right? Do not be deceived. Galatians 6:7. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. If you sow deception, you are going to reap disgrace. If you sow recklessness, you're gonna reap regret. That's just how this works. This applies to whether you are a slick media mogul or some starlet with champagne taste. This applies to everyone without distinction. So now that the trial is over, and many of us have learned way more freak nasty details about Diddy and Cassie and a bunch of other perverted freaks than we care to know about, in polite company. What are some real world takeaways after this whole case, now that it's over? The first thing I would say is that women need to recognize the warning signs well before they are swept off their feet. If you know there is a huge power imbalance, his world's a VIP playground, you're the only one without a ticket, slow down, pause. I'm not saying that every time there is a power imbalance that you'll end up in a situation like Cassie. However, you better keep the boundaries where they belong and analyze these situations when they come up, because nothing is for free. Lavish perks, private jets, luxury condos, just stacks of cash in exchange for freak nasty access. That's not romance. And first of all, for my audience, we Christians, so we ain't supposed to be doing that anyway. But I'm making a broad statement. It's a transaction. He does not love you. You're an object to him. And just like a football is an object, you were prone to getting kicked around just like one. Y'all saw the video. It happened in real time. Punted that girl just like she was a football. And then lastly, this one is simple. Own your choices. Just own your... Look, let's be clear. Consent today cannot be shrugged off tomorrow. If you like the match, you own the burn. No victim card can erase personal agency. And if this Me Too movement has taught us anything, it should be that. So overall, hashtag MeToo 2.0. It shouldn't be just a boys will be boys annulment ride. I'm not saying that, but we do need a movement that uplifts real survivors and demands personal responsibility on both sides. Because shame and regret should never be used as weapons, and they should be signals to course correct. You need to do something different. Overall, these are my thoughts on the P-Diddy freak nasty court case. Yes, we need to hold predators accountable, but we also need to hold participants responsible. And I think it's important that we demand nuance over all of the noise, because if this verdict taught us anything, we have learned that justice isn't blind. It sees choices. And all of us are accountable for what we do. We don't get to shift the blame, especially when you know better. But I am curious to know, what do you guys think? Drop your thoughts below. Did anything I present in this video land for you? I'd love to hear. Leave me a comment down below. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe if you've not done so already. Over here, we do a lot of truth talking. And if you are hungry for real truth from a biblical perspective, stick around. You might learn some things. But until next time, you guys, stay bold, stand firm, and above all else, stay unshakable. Grace and